But first, maybe we're not a bunch of hysterical whingers. Maybe we're not all looking for opportunities to moan about what so-and-so said or thought or did. I thought we loved jumping on the bandwagon these days. Jimmy Carr, out of order for gags about crippled soldiers. Frankie Boyle, social pariah for bad taste jokes about Down syndrome kids. And yet David's film, poking fun at Jews and Muslims in these, frankly, politically challenging times, is pretty much warmly received by all critics and cinema goers alike. So maybe we aren't a bunch of hysterical freaks. Maybe common sense does still prevail in the digital age. Maybe it takes a tabloid newspaper vendetta to get us outraged. If you think about it, only 2 people complained after Radio 2's Saxgate broadcast in October 2008, but 42,000 complaints were registered in the following week after the Daily Mail got stuck in. So, are we tolerant or are we too quick to condemn? I mean, you must have had concerns, proper concerns, about your film.
Yeah. I did, you know, obviously, I don't know when I was writing it, I didn't. I mean, I just thought I've got to write what I want to write, and then...
But did you write it as a response to Islamophobia?
No. But I did probably at some level write it thinking, well, this subject, race and religion, has been left alone by comedy for quite a long time due to a combination of fears about Islam and reprisals and a completely different fear about giving offence and what, you know, kind of PC weight that sits on the shoulders, and a notion that any joke about race and religion must be racist. And I thought for a long time that's not the case.
Yeah.
You know, it must be able to joke about this stuff if it's not coming from a bad place. It's a really big subject. You can't leave it alone comically. So I did think that. I mean, as regards to the outrage stuff that's happened with Frankie Boyle and all that stuff now, I think it's undoubtedly the case that that stuff gets whipped up by the tabloid press. You know, there seems to be a thing now that a combination of the tabloid press and a sort of community of people in the country aren't really happy unless they are angry.
Yeah.
The identity almost is found in anger. That this is who I am, an angry person. And I do think that, I mean, Saxgate was an incredible example of it, you know, of people just really deciding, I can fill my time with huge rage now. I don't have to think about anything else for a while because I can get so angry. You know, I mean, I think Frankie Boyle's a really good comedian. You know, he's a really good comedian. And I think, you know, his USP is I do stuff which is going to offend. So I haven't seen the joke, by the way. You know, this is what happens in these cases, is that someone does a joke and then the joke is considered too offensive or whatever to repeat. So no one can make their mind up because I wasn't there unless it's repeated in the press, but the press think it's too offensive.
Because I've been out of the country, I was also trying to find out this morning what the joke was, and it's not.
And that's very important. That's very important. Sorry, because you have to look at these things on a specific basis. You know, sort of what I was saying before about issues and whatever. There's no point in saying I've got a general model which says Down syndrome jokes are unacceptable. I don't believe that. I think you have to look at exactly what was said and exactly the tone in which it was said and the context with every case.
And the great British public, do you think... Well, before the show began, I was going to write a piece saying that we have changed, that we are more likely to complain, or that complaints get a bigger audience than they used to. But in actual fact, I'm not sure that we have changed. Maybe we are just the same.
There's much more space to complain, Matthew, isn't there?
Yeah, that's the kind of digital age,
yeah, the internet being the key thing. I mean, it was a combination. The Saxgate thing was a combination between the tabloids and the blogosphere. And, you know, people are now got so many spaces in which to vent their fury or give their opinion, which is great. That's democratic, and that's good. But at the same time, it does mean that things... You know, because you consider how many people exist in this country, even like 40,000 people isn't actually that many. That means there's millions and millions of people who aren't that bothered, you know. Do you think we are still the same Brits, or that we are more sensitive to... Well, I personally feel that Britain is an incredibly tolerant country. I mean, my mother was a refugee from Nazism, and one of the things I'm very proud about with Britain is that it has no tradition of sort of extremism. Every other country in Europe has got this tradition of extremism, and Britain, out of a combination just of sort of irony, I think, and having a sense of humour, and sort of generally being laid back and not that bothered, means that we haven't had that. And I think part of the problem with this idea that we are all furious is it creates the wrong idea of Britain. Britain is a sort of a laid-back, laissez-faire country, I hope.
Do you think we're still the same old Brits then, Liz?
I do. I just think that, you know, about the joke, I just think don't take the mickey out of people who can't defend themselves. That's my, you know, kind of like a rule for me.
But have you heard the joke?
No, I haven't.
Well, that's the problem.
No, yeah, absolutely. But
so isn't that slightly patronising to people with Down syndrome? Just because they've got Down syndrome doesn't mean they can't defend themselves.
No, I wasn't referring to that. I wasn't referring to that. I'm just in general. Absolutely in general. So, you know, and talking about
I'm fascinated about if how many people have to be offended before we know that the thing they're offended about has crossed a line. If one
23.
person's offended, do you need 40,000 people to be offended? If it's a joke about Down syndrome, does it matter if the people that are offended haven't got Down syndrome, but maybe people with Down syndrome did find it amusing? I mean, I'm completely in knots. I don't know what is the right thing and what isn't.
I think sometimes it's just, you know, like with, as you were saying about Saxgate, I just think that it was just like, oh, come on. That was a bit, you know, like, it was a joke that went, you know, it went a bit too far, but so many people were defending him, and it was like, you know, it's not that important in the grand scheme of things, is it? Really isn't.
But you think about the acres and acres of newsprint and discussion time we did it on this show countless times. We're doing it again now. That followed. So people do care. Or maybe it's just the media that cares.
No, that we like to get involved in things, don't we? We really do. But that's what I was saying about David's film. I just think it's such a breath of fresh air, and it's sort of like you can take a sigh with that film, because it's just like, it's tongue-in-cheek. It's actually something that's been so serious recently.
There are a number. I mean, there's one of the more prominent Jewish papers in this country came out, and the reviewer gave it quite a tough time. Although some of the previous articles have been more sympathetic about it. Yeah. Hardy, are we in more tolerant times, or?
I think there's a sense, kind of echoing what David said, and Liz to some extent. There's a sense of kind of moral disenfranchisement on people's parts. They don't feel. Political correctness seems to have come along and stopped people talking about things that actually matter to them. And you know, like, we can't talk about immigration in this country now without people being branded racists. Okay, we can't talk about all sorts of issues of a similar nature. You know, people are scared to ask other people, and people ask me about my turban and Sikhism and start the sentence with an apology. That's not what this country's about. You know, this country's about the fair exchange, a free exchange of information. If you want to, you know, if you see a Jewish guy with a yarmulke on, go over and talk. Don't apologise for asking about someone's faith and religion. And also,
I mean, I would be a bit scared though now. Nowadays, I'm scared.
But that's my point. Thing is this: it's sort of unfair to put Frankie Boyle in the same category as the infidel. The infidel comes. It's from a warm, beating heart. It's with such affection and with such love. Is that film made?
OK, I mean, that's David's point of judge each gag on a case-by-case basis, but I also take David's point that we don't know what Frankie Boyle's joke was, so it's kind of difficult
But also, it's a bit, you know, it's like, what's the headline? People offended by Frankie Boyle. It rained in Britain is a similarly controversial headline.
OK. Let's throw it open to you. Are we too quick to take offence, or maybe we're still the same old Brits? What do people say, Kirsty?
First we have Kirsty on line 1.
Another one. Kirsty, good morning.
Good morning.
So, what do we think? Are we still... Do we get too quick to take offence, or still the same old Brits?
I actually feel comedians appearing on TV have more of an obligation not to be offensive to the majority of the public. But if you actually go and see a comedian live, like Frankie Boyle, you actually know what sort of material he's going to be doing before you go, so you can't really take an offence at it. OK, so if you pay your money for a specific show, you go along, you are signing up for what you get. You've got no right to you know you like that person, that's why you've gone to see them live, so you can't really then complain about the gags they do.
OK, but you also think, Kirsty, that in television we should all be subjected to the same bland...
No, I'm not saying that, but all I'm saying, it should be more mainstream, because...
Why?
You don't know people...
We've got... How many channels do we have now on satellite TV? What, over 500?
Yeah.
So is there no room on television for a minority view, for something that people don't find entertaining? If you don't like it, you can always turn off.
Yes, you can, but I actually think there is actually a line which is wrong to cross over. I mean, like talking about our brave soldiers out there fighting and putting their lives on the line and actually being disabled in their line of work. I just think that is completely and totally out of order.
But in defence, I mean, not that it's for me to defend Jimmy Carr, he's gobby enough to do it himself. That joke that Jimmy... repeated was the joke that soldiers themselves use. Right, so it's OK for soldiers to cross that line, but not for Jimmy to repeat it.
Yes, but a lot of soldiers actually have a black sense of humour as well, because my mother was actually in the forces for years.
Can we call it a humour of colour, because black humour offends me? Don't disrespect my people, yeah? You get me? Don't disrespect me, yeah?
Listen, I've got to jump in there. We've got to take a break. We never get enough time for any of these talking points. And